Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Better Body Radio, and today I am joined by Florence Seabright. So I'll give you guys just a very brief intro. Flo is the founder of FitbyFlo, an online and in-person coaching business, and is also the founder of Intake Nutrition, a consultancy-based business offering workplace wellness programs and education. Flo is a former professional dancer at London Contemporary Dance School, The Place. After an injury forced her to leave behind her dancing aspirations, she qualified as a personal trainer in 2016. And by 2019, had gone on to become an M&U certified nutritionist. If you take a look at Flo's social media, she shows up consistently with content which is both evidence-based and practical for the everyday busy person. Flo, welcome to Better Body Radio.
Amazing. Thank you for having me on.
Of course. So we will literally dive into question number one, as we had a fairly nice, lengthy discussion off beforehand, which was great, by the way. It's always nice to catch up with people. So yeah, let's dive in. So in the intro, I mentioned that your background in professional dance, which I know requires an incredible amount of time and discipline and practice in order to pursue kind of this idea of constant mastery of the craft. What are some of the key learnings you would say from that time in your life, and how has that influenced your practice as a personal trainer?
So yeah, I think training as a dancer definitely shaped, I think, not even just my professional work, my professional life, but also my private life. So I started training when I was about 4 or 5, and then I got injured when I was about 18, 19. And I did just constantly outside of school. So I would go to normal school, and then I do about 15 to 20 hours of dance outside of that, which is just a bit ridiculous. But it was super intense. And on Saturdays, I'd spend the whole day in London and dance there. And then I'd go to Birmingham on Sundays sometimes to do National Youth Ballet. So I always was doing quite a lot, but I absolutely loved it. I think it's definitely shaped my character. So for instance, the kind of discipline that you have to learn definitely has kind of stuck with me. I mean, even doing your hair for class, it was ridiculous. Like, you'd have to have these slick back ponytails and everything had to be super neat, and you get kicked out of the class if your hair wasn't perfect. And even stuff like that, it just shapes your behaviors, because you start getting into a routine of trying to kind of chase perfection, even though you know you'll never be perfect. You can never be the perfect dancer, but you're constantly striving to be better. And I think there's some parts of that which are really great for me. And I think there are probably some parts of that that weren't so great for me. But yeah, so it kind of fostered my competitive spirit for sure. Less competitive with other people, more competitive with myself. It was always a challenge to be better than the last kind of session, the last class you'd had. So yeah, I think a lot of that kind of like hard work, discipline, competitive with yourself, that's really what I got as a person from it. Professionally, I think it's definitely shaped the way I approach training, because I think in the way I see a body, and the way I think it all kind of is connected. So we did a lot. Posture was obviously a massive thing when as a dancer, and it was something that was kind of hammered into you. And it's not necessarily the posture I would train into a normal kind of general population person now, because a lot of what they're trying to do is relatively unnatural, like trying to get your hips completely open and stuff. I mean, you should hear my hips, they pop like nobody's business because of turnout. It's a nightmare. But yeah, that kind of awareness of your core and where you're placing your body in space, and kind of your posture and your spine, that's definitely carried through into my training with clients. And I think it's something I focus on, especially at the beginning. I train a lot of kind of general population. I know it's gen pop, but I feel it's a weird saying. So normal people who just want to be healthier and fitter and feel better and live kind of pain-free lives. And a lot of the time they have postural issues, and that comes from a lot of different things, but it's usually, that's probably where I start in trying to get them set up in a really kind of strong way with their core and their glutes. And obviously you have to strengthen around that, but it's getting that physical awareness, I think, is super important for clients, especially when they're starting out. I think probably the importance kind of battling imbalances. So obviously in dancing, you tend to do everything on both sides, and you have to be good at it on both sides. So you're training your body really equally, and you're training it as one whole piece rather than one part in isolation. And then I think the other weird thing I have is I do a lot of visualizations. I don't know whether you do this ever with clients, but I when I train, I always do things like, I remember you said on COVID-19, do you remember the can thing you said about having a can in your core? I love that because that's great. The other one I've used is like, imagine your belly button's attached on a string to your spine, and it's like a lifting me. So lots of stuff like that, and that was all from dancing because that's how they trained you. They gave you kind of visualizations and encourage you to think of it that way. So yeah, I think really weird little things, but they've all stuck with me for sure.
Very cool. So there's kind of 2 points I want to pull out of that. But I guess the first thing was like when you asked if I am a visual person, I am someone, when I think about things, I see it in kind of movie form.
Yes.
And so I am very, in my brain, a very visual person. And so when I'm describing things, often people will notice that I kind of look up to my top left.
Yeah.
And so for anyone who's ever done like NLP or any kind of cognitive work, you kind of have ways that you access different information. And so yeah, I do tend to see things in pictures. And when I'm describing things to clients, a lot of the analogies are very descriptive and very visual, and imagine that this is doing this, or making those kind of comparisons to things that in everyday life they might be like, oh, well, actually I could understand that. Like, you know, telling someone to extend their humerus and do X, Y, and Z, it means nothing to them, but getting them to think about, just imagine this bone in your arm kind of moving back and around to the base of your spine, for example, and getting them to visualize what that looks like, and then getting them to then go, okay, well, you want to make sure that you're feeling this from this point to this point. And when you can combine the kinesthetic aspect with the visual aspect, that can be quite powerful. So yes, I definitely do things like that.
I'm glad it's not just me, to be fair. I thought I was a bit mental. Some people look at me like, what are you talking about? But
it's whatever works. And the thing is, what works for one client will work for another. I can use one cue on one client and it means nothing to the next. So I think that's just something that you sharpen and refine the more time you do it, as you kind of build your bank of cues, so to speak. There was an interesting point you made about obviously the discipline and the focus that you kind of cultivated through your practice as a dancer. And you obviously touched on that there was some really good things that came out of that, but there was also maybe not so many good things, or there were some things that maybe weren't so, I like to use the term resourceful and non-resourceful.
Great.
What were some of the maybe more non-resourceful things that maybe initially came out of that? And what have you done to kind of almost take the learning lessons from that and kind of overcome it?
So I think the biggest negative that probably came from it is I became quite self-critical, and I think that's the kind of hard work and ambition, drive like that is a double-edged sword. On the one side, it's really great, and you know, I worked hard and I kind of pushed myself and challenged myself, and on the other side, it can get you into this state where you're constantly not quite happy, not quite satisfied. You don't think you're doing well enough. You don't think you work hard enough. And I think when I was younger, I mean, I love the fact that I did dancing, and when I got injured, I was devastated, and I wish I could have continued. But it definitely did foster a kind of slightly poor relationship with myself over time. And that is something I had to work quite hard at overcoming. And I think it's one of those things that actually, I'm not sure you ever get rid of it 100% if you have that. I think you work really hard to kind of progress past it, and you have to keep working hard to make sure it doesn't come back, if that makes sense. So I think that was kind of the negative side of it. It was amazing, but within that kind of drive and competition and hard work and striving for perfection, it takes people one of two ways. And I think for me, it probably encouraged me to have a slightly poor relationship with myself, poor relationship with food, quite anxious and stressed, and then I kind of had to work quite hard at overcoming that. But you know, it could be that it wasn't dancing, it could be anything that could have kind of taken me that way. If it was kind of how I am as a person anyway, I'm kind of slightly like that. So yeah, I think that's probably the one downside, I would say.
Interesting. And it's funny, one thing you touched on there, and I think this comes up, and you see this a ton with professional athletes and sportsmen and sportswomen, is that they almost like, you create a certain level of identity to certain things. So for example, back then your identity was, I'm Flo the dancer. And so if a huge amount of your identity is wrapped up in this very activity that you spend so much of your time in life doing, that's then taken away from you all of a sudden. It's as if it's a huge shock to your, well, who am I? And
oh yeah,
you have this big conflict of, well, I'm a dancer, but I can't dance. So what the hell can I do? What the hell is this all about? And I think this can happen for a lot of people. You see it with clients who, for example, I think might have spoken about this with Louis when he was on, but this idea of, in rugby, for example, you know, the bigger, heavier guys, when they're kids, just naturally become prop forwards, because prop forwards are seen as the overweight kids, and that's where they play, as the front row.
yeah,
It could even be just for our clients, like, you know, someone who sees themselves as overweight, then they achieve results really quickly without taking the time to kind of really, in a cognizant level, like, go, right, well, okay, well, I'm now changing who I am to become this newer version of myself. Problem is if a body transformation happens without an identity transformation, that can be really problematic, because if the identity, despite being 25 kilos lighter, is still that 25 kilo heavier person,
for sure.
they're going to resort back to the very behaviors and acts and ways of thinking of, well, I don't deserve to be this, I am that person, and then they end up backtracking to that point. So
Yeah.
I find that whole idea of identity very interesting, and I think I might have mentioned this book during the CoFit event, the Psycho-Cybernetics.
Yes, you did, yeah.
Hugely dives into that whole concept of self-identity and how much we rely on that as far as informing how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about our perception of others, of ourselves, and everything else. So
I think
super interesting.
in the identity crisis, when I had to stop dancing, was insane, and I wasn't prepared for it. And me being me, when I first had to stop, I was very kind of like suppressed everything. I was like, well, I'm fine. I'll just go to university, because that's what you do. And I really kind of pushed it down, and it took me, you know, a year later, I was still then having to go back and rifle through all these emotions that I hadn't dealt with, and the identity of just not knowing who I was anymore, which seems insane, because now I think of myself as Flo. I'm not my identity is not a personal trainer, it's not a nutritionist, it's me, and those are the things that I do and the things that I enjoy. But at that point, yeah, I was barely even Flo, I was a dancer, if that makes sense. So no, it was
100%.
a crazy change.
Yeah, and you and honestly, you see that, and I think it's important to try and figure that out early. That, for example, and I'll kind of use a client example and a coach example with the coaches, is that, you know, you can end up becoming like, okay, my only identity is I'm a coach, and you find it really difficult to remove yourself away from coaching, because it can very easily, and I've been there, and would argue that it's still there to a degree. It becomes a very all-consuming role, and especially if you're passionate about it and you genuinely enjoy it, you can find yourself spending every spare minute of the day either researching, reading, doing more work, whatever it is, because your identity almost becomes, well, okay, like, for example, I'm Ross the coach, but the reality is you're also Ross the brother, Ross the husband, and so then taking that back to our clients as well, it's kind of like when they turn and say, well, I'm overweight, I'm an asshole, or I'm worthless, or whatever language they use to describe themselves, it's kind of like, okay, but what about with your family? Would you say that your family think you're a good, you know,
person,
daughter, person? And yeah, okay, well, what about at work? Are you someone who gets your job done, and, you know, your boss is happy with it? Yeah. So it's like, so you're not a bad person, you're just not happy with the way you currently are health wise, and you're just carrying maybe a bit of excess fat. That doesn't make you a bad person. It just
for sure
means that wasn't a priority for a period of time. And once you identify that you're not that overweight person, that's just a part of who you are at the moment, but that can change. So
100%.
yeah. So speaking of CoFit, we spoke together on the topic of mobility very recently, and given your background, this will be an area that it's quite fair to say you've probably put a lot of time and effort into. So since becoming a PT, having had increased exposure to resistance training, both on a personal level and with your clients, what do you feel tend to be some of the biggest misconceptions around resistance training and mobility?
So I think there's definitely been trends in this area, and I think those trends are changing, which is amazing. But it used to be that resistance training was a bit of a kind of like bro thing. So obviously it tended to be like, oh, bro. Yeah, bro, like, I'm a man, I resistance train. But actually what's really nice to see is so many more women, and there's this are now realizing that resistance training is such an important part of what they should be doing, and that and you know, whether or not they want to build muscle, which also I think women have now realized is a completely valid goal to have. And more women have the goal to build muscle, which is amazing. But even if they don't want to necessarily build loads of muscle, they realize that it's important for strength and for kind of long-term health. And so that's awesome to see. So I think that's starting to change. I think I still get kind of clients who I start with a bit nervous about resistance training though. And I think I was saying this to another coach the other day. I said, I think what we see, the kind of information we see, because I follow a lot of coaches and I follow a lot of other practitioners. A lot of the information I see, I kind of think, well, everyone's saying the same things. Everyone must know this information. And actually, you get people coming to you who don't necessarily see this information, don't necessarily know this stuff. And so when you kind of sit down and have that chat to start with, sometimes they can be really nervous about resistance training, either because they're worried about kind of gaining too much muscle too quickly, or because I think nerves around kind of lifting heavy and whether it's actually like healthy for them. And there's some misconceptions around that. So I think kind of breaking down those when you start with those kind of myths and misconceptions with a client is really important when you start. And I think the mobility thing is changing as well. Mobility as well, I think there's been a bit, I think it's been seen as a little bit kind of girly in the way that resistance training's been seen as like quite bro. Historically, I think mobility work has been seen as like not massively important. And I think that's changing, which is great to see. And so the rise of like coaches like you who are obviously really knowledgeable in both areas and are showing how important they are and how much they work together as well. So that's great to see. So I think all of this stuff is changing over time, but those kind of residual myths I think still exist around all of these different areas. So it's definitely something I find I have to kind of work through with clients when they first start, and that's totally fine. You know, everyone starts somewhere, and why should they know this information? And I think it's about showing them the kind of the benefits of resistance training, the benefits of mobility work, and showing them how it's gonna, you know, for instance, from the muscle gain, we spoke about this at CoFit. And if they're looking for kind of hypertrophy or muscle gain, and they're by like maximizing the mobility, they're maximizing the work they're doing in the gym, they're maximizing their chances of growing that muscle. So it's not something that should be seen as optional. It's all part and parcel of the goal they're trying to get to. I think the one thing I've struggled with people who are, I think, okay, we really need to do some strong mobility work to start. Sometimes I've struggled with clients who are like, they don't feel like they're getting that like sweat on after a session. And there are some, I'm sure you've seen, like, come across this as well, some kind of myths surrounding what a good workout is. And so you kind of, lots of people feel like they need to be really sweaty, like red in the face, dripping in sweat, or in huge amounts of pain and barely able to walk out of the gym in order to feel like they've had a good session. But it's all about, you know, training smart and like understanding what you're doing, why you're doing it, and having effective sessions rather than sessions that just ruin you, you know? So yeah, I think there's lots of different things around resistance training and mobility, but the amazing thing is that I definitely think it's changing, and there's, as I said, more and more coaches that are showing how important it is, and I think that will slowly change the tide.
I couldn't agree more. And it's funny, I was nodding a lot towards the end there, because this whole idea of, I suppose, like feeling like you have to go and just be heart bursting out your chest, sweating buckets to get an effective workout. Like my wife, she is non-stop going on about, granted it's partly because she doesn't like cardio very much, but she still does it. Whereas I do like cardio, but no, just the importance of understanding what an effective workout is. And I think it's just because the industry has a lot to answer for with that, like this idea of, you know, like no pain, no gain, and push
No
your
days off.
limits,
Yeah.
hashtag no days off and all
Yeah,
that stuff.
hate that.
And the problem is, any sensible coach knows, like, fuck, if I don't take any days off, I'm not going to be able to sustain the level I'm working at.
Sure.
So I think that's a huge point to touch on, is just knowing what effective training is. There was one thing that was actually non-related to mobility, which I thought was an interesting idea, is this idea of existing in echo chambers. So, for example, like you said, on social media, coaches, we can, and we fell into this trap a number of times, thinking that we're delivering messages which is speaking to our audience, but the reality is it's not. You're kind of just listening to a lot of the same people who share the same views, and that might be cool to make you feel warm and fuzzy inside. But as far as stretching you and kind of getting you to step outside your comfort zone or to embrace new concepts, if you constantly follow or just look at what's going on in your own bias, then how do you expect to ever grow or kind of expand your perspective? So I agree. I think with clients, they don't see all the things we see. They don't know that, for example, there's lots and lots and lots of people talking about, well, the reason why that you're not growing is because you don't have enough mobility to reach your length and range, and so you're not stimulating those pathways, those anabolic pathways, as much as you could. And so to us, we're kind of like, oh yeah, that's just common sense. But our clients are not seeing, like you say, that same message repeated every single day over a long period of time. So I agree with you, though. I do think, like, there's a lot of good practitioners who are starting to get that message across. That, listen, it isn't a case of you don't have a choice. If you want longevity and you want the optimal outcome from your training, and especially if you think about it, like, for general population clients, most of them just want good overall general physical preparedness. And that's where I think CrossFit, if it's applied right and done right, and I went through a period of both coaching and competing in CrossFit, as long as the general population can separate themselves from what they see at the CrossFit Games, which is not original CrossFit. That's a sport. That's actually it's a high level of specificity to be very good at CrossFit professionally. And I would know, because I was, never quite got to the games like that, but I did go to regionals with a team. So I've kind of had the whole 4 hours a day, 6 days a week training, understanding what it takes. For general population, as long as they're kind of generally mobile, have decent energy systems, fairly strong, have enough muscle tissue to be metabolically healthy, all those things, then that's really all they can ask for. So I think even if you're a physique athlete, power lifter, there's always going to be, and I always like this idea of what's the minimum effective amount you need to keep yourself safe and healthy. Even power lifters need mobility.
Oh yeah.
Even if their range of motion is only where it needs to get to. But I always talk about this idea of having buffers as well.
Yes.
If you can create a buffer around all the things that you do, then whenever you get into a really sticky situation, you're always going to be at least safe. So all the points you mentioned, I think, are spot on. And here's to hoping that more and more and more mobility knowledge goes out to the masses.
For sure.
Especially
back, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. And and I think probably another one that came through my head while you were saying your answer was, I've actually worked with quite a few yogis or people who are very heavily into yoga, and we talked about this on the CoFit event, that this idea that flexibility and mobility are not the same, and those two often get used interchangeably. Like, we understand that flexibility is just simply a muscle's ability to lengthen, whereas mobility is the ability to coordinate most units, contract, be able to create tension through a full range of motion. And it's amazing how many yogis that they can literally sit in the bottom of a squat, like beautiful, perfect Chinese style squat, but then you put a little bit of weight and it's like all over the place. And so I think that's probably one of the easiest examples to give people, is that you have to earn mobility. It's not something you get just by being flexible or just by being strong. It's this kind of dual pursuit of both all the time.
For sure. Couldn't agree more.
So let's move on to a little bit of nutrition. Because of course you started, so you obviously so you started out in 2016 as a personal trainer, and I think, like most personal trainers that get into the business will generally have at least a curiosity around nutrition. And of course, it's like with personal training clients, like we want to put so much of an emphasis, like, this hours for training, and we want to make sure you learn and understand training, but inevitably nutrition questions get thrown at you left, right, and center. So this usually leads for all of us at some stage to go and pursue some form of nutrition qualification. And of course, you chose a very good one. Not that I'm biased, because I also have it as well. You went and did MNU in 2019, and you obviously qualified as well. Well, 2018 to 2019, right?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. So what led you to study the MNU course, and how has that changed the way you practice with your clients?
So yeah, as you said, I think lots of people, when they start as a coach, it becomes apparent how that's just one side of the equation. You really need to have a good understanding of the nutrition as well in order to be able to help clients properly. I started FitbyFlo when I was at university. So I did a history degree at KCL after I had to quit dancing. So I did my degree, and in the summer of my first year, I started FitbyFlo and then basically worked full time alongside university for the next 2 years. And then when I graduated, which means finals were a very sticky couple of weeks because I was working full time and trying to do my finals, and it was all stressful, but we got through. And then I launched, and so I pretty much a couple of months after I left university, I was like, right, I'm now starting at MNU. So I wanted to start it as quickly as possible, but doing my history degree, I just couldn't do all three at once. And so I'm kind of started as quickly as I could. I think for me, it wasn't just that I could see how important it was within my training with clients. I could see that obviously it was a massive part of the equation, but I also knew that, I think training and nutrition are quite unregulated industries. And my thing has always been, I really want to make sure that I'm delivering the right information and stuff that's going to help my clients and not damage them. And given we are kind of dealing with health and physical health and mental health, and it all kind of feeds into it, to kind of, the fear is that if I wasn't qualified as well as I could be, that I would be damaging people rather than helping them. So for me, it was very much a pursuit of trying to be the best practitioner I could be. And I loved MNU. I'm sure you did too. It was such a great course, and I think it really challenged me to think about how I could be better, how I can practice in the best way. And I think it had a knock-on effect on my personal, and as a personal trainer, making me trying to even upskill in that area as well. So I think it's changed my practice massively. I think I have more of a focus now on educating my clients and empowering them with the knowledge that they need to make informed choices. So I think I want to basically people to come away from training, as I think I've seen someone else say this, and I couldn't agree with it more, that if I've done my job, you should be able to leave me and be like, cool, I know what I'm doing and I'm happy and I can maintain where I'm at and I've got it. And if I've done my job right, you should be able to leave me and be happy that you know what you're doing. And I think that's kind of what I want to do with my coaching, is make sure that I'm educating them, empowering them with knowledge, but also coaching them on the whole picture. So it's the nutrition, it's the exercise, it's the daily movement, it's all of it packaged up into one. And I think, given the people I train, which tend to be kind of normal everyday people who just want to be healthier and fitter and stronger and look good and feel good in their own skin and maybe be a bit stronger, that's what they want. They want a lifestyle that can basically maintain them where they want to be long term. And it's about kind of coaching them in all the other different areas to try and get there. I think the other side of it is that when I was younger and I was dancing and stuff, and I kind of touched on it earlier, I had a really poor relationship with food. And one of the best things for me in terms of getting over that was educating myself in terms of nutrition. And even when I did MNU, even that, I mean, I kind of had worked through a lot of it, but even when I did MNU, it was this extra kind of thing of like, I know even more now, and it kind of helped with my own stuff, not just with my practice with clients. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about helping my clients make sure that they're not getting wrapped up in these myths and these misconceptions that ultimately just are disempowering, and also can really encourage like not only poor physical health but poor mental health. And it's not worth it. If you're going to compromise your mental health, it's not worth it. So I think all of that kind of ties up together. And yeah, I couldn't be happier. I think it was the best thing I've done actually in terms of my career, for sure.
Brilliant. And I think it's funny, I don't know if this was the same. It certainly was when I first qualified, which seems like ages ago now, but let's maybe try to give up a bit of my age there as well. You're kind of taught a bit when you kind of first qualify as a PT, I guess, to all these different tactics about how you can make clients dependent on you. Like, you know, you want to retain clients, you want to make them dependent. And I think it's literally any good coach that I speak to, or at least any ethical coach that I speak to, says exactly the opposite. And I agree the same. As like, you should ideally get to a point where whenever the end of that journey is with you, and listen, like some clients may need a year, year and a half, 2 years. It really depends on them. Someone like might literally just need you for like, right, I've got this event coming up and I just need a really focused period to get in the best shape of my life in that 12 weeks.
I think
and
so.
That's perfectly fine as well. But so I think often we've kind of been known to talk about this because we're not a big fan of a lot of the 8 and 12 week transformations, at least not in the sense of the way they were traditionally sold, which was achieve your ideal body in 8 to 12 weeks. I think if someone has got that time frame to get their body to a different place from where it is now and to look or feel a certain way, I've got no issues with that whatsoever. The problem is when it's marketed is this is how long it should take. And if you don't get there, it's been a failure. So I think it's just this idea of, like you said, I love this word. I think it's used, it's probably one of the biggest. And I don't want it to become a buzzword because it, unfortunately, all the words that get used often in the fitness industry eventually end up being utilized, or scrupulous individuals will start taking it and trying to use it in a non-positive way. So yeah, but just empowering clients to be able to, like you say, like I think if you try and force a belief system on them, you know, it's like you get straight high five to the face, like they're not interested, but you let them kind of almost stumble upon the answers themselves because you've been peppering in the things they need to know. If you can get to a point, like you say, where they become self-sufficient, they can make their own mind up about things, they're informed and they know how to do things that keep them at the very least safe, then I think, yeah, that's all we can really ever hope for. And of course, get some great results along the way as well.
For sure. I think with the dependency thing as well, I think, I don't want my clients to become dependent on me. I think even I've actually trained I have clients that I've trained for 3+ years now, and actually it's not that necessarily even that they need me, it's more that they just like training with me, in the sense that they like having someone there. They probably, I mean, a lot of the times I have conversations with clients that I've had for a long time, and I say, okay, well, how's this? Cool. So what we want to think about is X, Y, and Z, and they pretty much say it before I can even say it. Like they know what they know what they need to do. It's just about having someone there, kind of to keep them accountable at that point. So yeah, I have kind of really long-term clients that I love coaching, and I think they use it as motivation and accountability, and they just get into a habit of kind of liking that way of training, which is totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I can't remember who it was that said it. It might have been Steve Jobs, one of these people, Google or Apple or whatever else.
Yeah.
But they just talk about this idea of, like, with employees that, and it kind of applies to your clients in a way, this idea that you give them all the skills and the tools they need, that they could leave you at any time, but they don't, because they absolutely love what they do and they enjoy being part of that environment and that team. And I think that's the same idea with clients, is that you give them all the tools they need. So technically speaking, they don't really need you, but if they so happen to want to keep working with you, then that's only just a testament to you as a person, as a coach. So I 100% couldn't agree more. So last question before we get into the quick fire round, which is always gets and giggles. You have 2 strings to your business bow. So you also have FitbyFlo and you have Intake Nutrition. Now, to touch on the Intake Nutrition arm, that provides I think you've mentioned, the workplace wellness consultancy based services. So what have you found to be, I suppose, the main challenges that the employer, of both the employer and the employee in the workplace?
So yeah, I think a couple. So yeah, FitbyFlo and Intake Nutrition kind of work separately. Both work with one-to-one clients, but they also work together. So they're kind of sister businesses in that sense. But yeah, Intake Nutrition is where I work with businesses to help them support their employees, can live a kind of healthier life, and therefore be happier in the workplace and all that good stuff. I think one of the difficulties I see tend to be the difficulties that you probably see with clients who have busy lives and busy careers. So it tends to be that a lot of these industries, everyone is, I mean, they're very fast paced, they tend to be, and it tends to be a lot of hard work, long hours, busy days, not being able to leave their desk, sedentary lifestyles, wanting to work on their health and their activity and their nutrition, but not necessarily having the time to give to it, or the headspace to give to it. Obviously with the sedentary lifestyles, as I'm sure as you know, there's so many kind of health issues that are wrapped up with that if it goes unchallenged. But when it comes to people's work and their careers, it's so important for a lot of people that actually they end up prioritizing that, and their health kind of goes by the wayside. And obviously with the stress and mental health as well, that all kind of plays into it. So I think it's about understanding that the challenges they're facing aren't necessarily going to go away. These are busy people with busy lives and exciting careers, and it's about trying to make it work around that. So trying to make changes that fit in with their lifestyle. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions that kind of, in order to be healthy, you have to meal prep 7 days a week, and you have to go to the gym for 4 sessions a week, or do 10,000 steps a day. Otherwise, there's just no point in trying. And actually, it's not. Obviously, we know that's not the case. There's so much you can do, and so many different ways you can make it work for you. And I think it's also how you look at the environment within the workplace and help employers think about that environment and how they can maximize the environment to help their employees as best as possible. So what you're providing them within their working day, the perks you're giving them. So yeah, there's lots of different things. It's a cool area to be working in. And a couple of the things I offer I'll do kind of seminars or webinars at the moment, and on particular topics. Also, I do kind of in-house nutrition clinics, again, virtually at the moment. So I can provide support to individual employees, which is really cool. And then at the moment, I'm also offering kind of activity. So with FitbyFlo, virtual workouts and stuff like that, just to kind of get people moving. I think right now, there are even more challenges because so many people are now working from home, and that's such a different environment for a lot of people. And I think the work-life balance there for a lot of people, is starting to fray, because they live where they work and they work where they live now. And it's about kind of probably offering even more support at this point with health, habit coaching, kind of stress awareness of the stress, nutrition, activity, all of that, to try and help them cope with what's going on like with coronavirus and everything. So no, it's a very cool area to be in. But I think a lot of the challenges are probably challenges you've seen with clients as well, just on a kind of more slightly different approach to it.
Yes, I mean, we'll get into some of those in a second, because I've got a very interesting spin on that same question, but for more of your Gen Pop clients that maybe you're not getting through corporate specific interactions. But the thing you mentioned about the whole at home, like, I mean, I've spoken about this, I think now I know Mark and I do it, I've done it in our lives, because it's a huge topic of conversation at the moment about, place I work is now the place I have to train, it's now the place I have to sleep in. And it's true, like, people have very strong associations with environments, right? And I think for a lot of people, that's why the gym environment can never be replaced, because it's a place that you go, it's like your third space. I mean, that's obviously why the third space in London created the name, because it's a very good description of it. It's like you have home, you have work, and then there's this kind of place that you get to go play, you get to put back into yourself, because you've been giving so much of yourself out to everyone else across the day, whether it's family, whether it's work. Unfortunately now the home has now became all three places, and so that can be a huge hurdle to navigate. And I'll be honest, like, as much as I like to think I'm fairly good with how I handle my clients, there was a few of them where it took them to like after 3 weeks before I could even get them to just start exercising, because it had that much of an effect on them on a personal level. And I think it's also just making sure that we're not guilting people, because everyone's dealing with it in their own way. And, it's just finding, right, well, okay, you might have been doing 4 super hardcore resistance training sessions in the gym per week, and the last 2 weeks you've done nothing. Okay, well, what can you do? What can you give me? Can you give me 20 minutes of this? Can you give me half an hour of that? And I think that's such a good message to get across, is that, there's no right or wrong at this point in time, because it's a completely new challenge for everybody.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more.
To the question with your, I suppose, your more general clients. So if I mean, I'm not sure how your intake process works, but knowing from the way we do things, we have an application form that people have to fill out, and then there's like a onboarding form if someone decides they're going to start coaching.
Yeah.
And I'm doing this because I know you're visual, so I know you'll like it like this. Is if you had to imagine your intake form and you ask people what the biggest challenges they're kind of going through right now, and you had to almost think, right, if I had to do like a census collection of all of the main challenges that my clients ever say that they're facing, if you maybe highlight the top kind of 2 to 3 challenges that you would say people, like if someone signs up to you and they say, right, what are your biggest challenges right now? It is X. Yeah. What would those kind of top 2 to 3 challenges be?
I think they've changed slightly over the last couple of months because of coronavirus. But if I were to take kind of coronavirus out of the equation for now, I think they tend to be things like time, motivation, and consistency. And those tend to be the biggest ones I've seen. I think a lot of people actually know more than they think they do in terms of what they should be doing and how they should be eating and the things they should be working towards. But I think a lot of people doubt themselves as well and doubt the knowledge that they have. So I've had clients come to me and say, oh, I'm doing this, but should I be doing this or should I be doing this? And I'm like, you had it right the first time. That's great. The reason we're doing this is X, Y, and Z. This will lead us on to X, Y, and Z. And it's kind of that reassurance and building their confidence back up that they actually do have this and that they, don't need to like double second guess themselves.
There you go.
But I think it's time, motivation, and consistency. Time, especially with people in kind of a corporate world, it tends to be that actually they have incredibly busy days and early mornings, late nights, fast paced in an office. And I've actually worked with a lot of clients like that. And I think it feels like a barrier to change, the lack of time. But actually, sometimes there's more time than you think there is. Not saying in every single day, but maybe potentially at weekends. There's certain things you can do to kind of set yourself up for a good week. And it's also about knowing that you don't need an hour and a half to 2 hours every week, every day. You don't need that in order to do everything you need to do. You can, 10 minutes here, 10 minutes here, 50 minutes here, in terms of habits and how you're approaching your nutrition and your lifestyle. That's a good place to start. That's still better than nothing. So, and as you start implementing that, it becomes a lot easier to then build that and grow that, because once you've got 10 minutes every day that you're working on your kind of health in a bigger picture, so whether it's kind of mobility, it's prepping a healthy meal, or it's going for getting some steps in, whatever it is, but that's 10 minutes a day you're dedicating to you and your health and your goals. Once you've got that, it's easier to go, okay, cool, maybe on Wednesday I'll do half an hour because I actually do have a bit more time. It's the kind of entry point, which is the really, really hard thing. And then I think motivation is a big one. I see we actually spoke about this at CoFit, about the motivation thing. My opinion on motivation is that it is fickle and not to be relied on. So
that was very stern. It's fickle. It's bullshit.
It's bullshit. So I would always say to people, don't rely on motivation. Obviously, it is awesome to feel motivated all the time, but I can tell you now, I don't feel motivated all the time. And actually, what I don't think, and nobody does, but what some people do have is very strong habits that see them through. And I think, obviously, if there's a chronic problem with motivation, there's probably something worth looking at there. And that is going to be a barrier to change, and barrier to working towards your goals. But if actually it's just that some days you're not feeling motivated and some days you are, that's normal life. So it's about creating almost that backup plan through habit formation that kind of keeps you ticking along whether or not you want to. So sometimes I get out of bed to do a workout and think, well, I would rather stay in bed right now, but it's part of my habit. And by the end of the workout, I feel really good and I'm glad I did it. On the kind of other side of that, there is a kind of skill to learn when to push through and when to back off. And so I think incorporating that with clients is important, to say, okay, Are you just not feeling motivated? Will you feel good after it? Or is there something else going on? Do you actually need to rest? Do you need to take a step back? So I think that it's also kind of looking at that. And then I think, what was my last one? Consistency, right? So with consistency, yes, I think that's linked to the motivation. I think people's peaks and troughs with motivation. So I think habit formation is a big one there. But the other thing I see is people setting themselves up to do too much too fast. So they wonder why they can't. They kind of go say, okay, Monday morning, I'm going to do 8 workouts next week. I'm only going to eat salad leaves for lunch and dinner. Might snack on some dust, and then that'll be great. And they get to kind of Wednesday, and they're like, they don't know why they can't keep going with it, and it's just because they've gone too far the other way. A lot of the time, I think with the consistency, if people are really struggling with that, then I say start small. Start with something small and manageable, and then build that. Do kind of the lowest viable thing, the smallest viable thing every single day, and then that you can build on and grow. But as long as you're doing that every single day, that's helping you learn consistency. So yeah, I think this is all why the habit formation and the coaching someone to live and coaching someone as a full person rather than just training or just nutrition is so important, because it's all good and well saying this is the most optimal thing to do, so go and do that. And actually, I think, there is a toss-up. I've seen this before as well, but it's an excellent saying. There's toss-up between optimal and achievable. And you have to find the perfect balance there, really.
Definitely. There's a couple of really great points to kind of pull out of that as well. And I think I'll start with one of the things you just said last there is this idea of small wins adding up over time. So we've actually got on our sales pages for our coaching program, we use this little phrase in there about the sum of marginal gains paradox. Where imagine like if you draw a dot on a line and you draw a straight line, you take the second dot at the same starting point and you just do that. There's only so far that it's going to, for you to get to that end point, it's going to take, it might feel like you're going to get there quickly, but how sustainable, if you had to put sustainable on that axis and time and effort taken on that one, how sustainable is the big upward line there? But the other thing that people don't see is that you could literally start with 1-2 degrees. And as you start drawing that line, it looks like, well, the other line's hardly left the bottom line yet, but give that time and give that time and give that time. And that gap between that bottom line and that top line over time gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And this is what people don't, and that's just one thing. Then imagine you add a second habit you've improved on top of that, then a third, then a fourth. And so like you said, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It can be just these little sums of marginal gains that add up over time to become something quite a bit more significant. Sure. So I could not agree more with that. It's just this idea of trying to do way too much way too soon versus what's the minimum effective dose I need to get just the amount of return, not even maximal returns, because I think people like to use this term of getting optimal and the most. The reality is what's the minimum I need to do just to get a sufficient amount of return for my efforts at this point in time.
For sure.
Because I don't think it's necessarily realistic to expect maximal returns if the level of effort isn't, and some people aren't at a stage where they're capable of. I use the training example all the time. If you've not got a certain level of strength, you can't expect to be able to develop. You're not going to be able to push as hard as someone who has got 5 years under the belt and is strong. Like they can just put more output in a short amount of time. That's just a fact. You need to pay your dues. I suppose the other thing as well is related to, you obviously said, okay, outside of the coronavirus times, but I actually think that the coronavirus times have actually given us quite a valuable lesson, because a lot of clients would often say, right, well, I don't have time to train, or I don't have access to a gym, or when I travel, it's really difficult to know where I can train. But I think one thing that, if anything, the COVID and all the home workouts have taught us is that we can actually achieve a hell of a lot more with minimal equipment than a lot of people think they can. And so I'm very interested to see when we come out of this whole situation, how many people will still think it's relevant to give the excuse of I don't have access to a gym and I'm traveling. It's like, well, what did you do when it was COVID? You stripped it back, bodyweight exercises, just super, super focused on a few different exercises and progressing those. And so I think, like you said now, like if you've got someone who's a professional person, super busy during the week, and say, for example, gyms do open again, and you're only expecting them to get 3 resistance training sessions in a week, if they schedule 2 of those in on over here, it'd be Friday and Saturday because that's the weekend in Dubai, but in the UK it would be Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah.
2 of your resistance training days are then, and you literally just have 1 resistance training day to get in during the week. Now imagine that when you say to someone, you need to get all 3 of your days during your working week, and versus I just need you to get 1.
Yeah.
I just need 1 day from you. That then becomes a way bit more achievable, right? And I think that's just comes down to effective coaching and listening to the person in front of you, right? So I couldn't agree more for all the things you said. I think time, motivation, consistency, definitely stuff that comes up again and 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 again. Definitely. So we've made it through the main part of the interview, but now this is where the real test comes. It's the quick fire round.
Oh dear.
So Johnny said he was a bit scared going into this, but he rocked it. So you've got nothing to worry about. No, you're all good. You're all good. So this is a fun part of the podcast. Allows the listeners just to get to know you a little bit better and just see some of your
quirks,
either potentially interesting or quick answers to some of the questions. So let's see how we got on.
Cool.
All right, let's dive in, shall we? So black coffee or milky coffee?
Milky coffee. I love a skinny latte. Can't lie.
So you would think wifey being from Sweden that it would just be all about the pure coffee. Nope, loves lattes. So she's right there with you on that. For me, I'm a double espresso guy. So
I'd see. I think that is just madness. I'm not sure how you can drink that double espresso. Absolute madness. But hey ho, each their own.
Well, it's a long way away from the venti mocha from Starbucks.
Yes. Oh yeah, that's a bit much. A skinny latte, it just kicks off my morning nicely,
But it's all the sum of marginal gains. It took me time to build up.
True.
Cookies or donuts?
Cookies. Oh, love a cookie. Chocolate chip.
Especially a soft baked one, or you're a crunchy cookie person?
Oh God, no, that's a biscuit. Cookie has to be soft.
Let's not get into any biscuit versus wafer versus cake discussions. Need to get Dr. Mike II on to discuss that, I think.
For
sure. Favorite exercise?
For a while it was bench press. I love incline bench press. I know that's really random, but I love the feeling of being strong, and that's a movement that makes me feel really strong. Other than that, probably a hip thrust, a heavy hip thrust. I do love a heavy hip thrust. The
thrust is a must.
Exactly. Yeah.
Least favorite exercise?
Lunges. Absolutely detest lunges, as do 90% of my clients, and I think most people in the world. But you know what? They are an important movement and a very beneficial movement to have as part of your program. So it's one of those things that try and find ways to enjoy them more. For some reason, I enjoy like Bulgarian split squats more, like step ups more. I don't mind single leg variations, but the split squat, just split stance, that kills me. Don't know why.
Yeah, when you said like, and 90% of my clients, I was just thinking to myself, like, no one likes a split squat. No. I actually really like split squats and lunges though.
So double espressos and you like split squats. I'm worrying now, Ross. I'm worrying.
Who is this sadistic individual?
Yeah, exactly.
What's an interesting fact people may not commonly know about you?
I always go to this one. I was born in Tokyo in Japan. How random is that?
Hugely random.
We were out there. My parents lived there for 3 years, and I was born, and we left when I was 1, and then we moved to South Africa, and then we moved to England when I was 3. So I don't remember any of it, unfortunately, but it was for my dad's work. We traveled.
Cool. What's your favorite meal out?
Japanese food is my favorite food of all time. So sushi, any type of Japanese food. It's actually my very randomly, it's my birthday tomorrow. So tomorrow evening we're having sushi and sukiyaki, which is like a Japanese brothy meal thing. So yeah, favorite type of food.
Very cool. So when this whole post-COVID madness dies down, and say we're allowed to start traveling at some stage, whenever that will be, if you could only travel to one place, where would that be?
Oh, that is so hard. Oh, I'm not sure I could do that. I love traveling and I love going to different places. I've got a massive list of places I want to go next. I think it would have to be somewhere hot. I'm really, really, really pathetic in the cold. And so to avoid just me moaning for the rest of my life, I think it'd probably have to be somewhere hot, but I couldn't nail it down to one place.
Oh, I don't know if I can take that answer. Like I need a place, Flo.
Okay, I'll find one. I love Thailand. Let's say Thailand. Or
Nice.
New Zealand. I've never been, but I've always wanted to go to New Zealand. So maybe I'll live there for the rest of my life before even, never having gone.
Just shows you from no answers to gun to the head, 2 answers. So there you go.
Yeah, true.
What scares you the most?
No, I think not being. I know this sounds really weird. Not being as good as I could be. The thing that scares me the most is not kind of the idea of not kind of living to my full potential, in terms of life, in terms of anything that flies as well. So flies, bees, wasps, spiders, bugs, and not living up to my full potential. There you go.
That's another double answer there, 2 for 1. What excites you most about the future?
That's a good question. I think I've got a lot of plans for what I want to do and what I want to achieve, and that excites me.
Nice.
Yeah.
And who should we have on the podcast next?
Ooh, so many good people. Charlotte.
She's on tomorrow.
Is she? Amazing. James Hesling.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a good one. He's a lovely, lovely guy. And he's got an awesome platform called All Shape Up, and he's doing lots of great things. So yeah. And also he's just a hoot and a half. So
yeah, I've been meaning to make out some people that I haven't reached out to from the CoFit event yet has been Mark Warsick.
Yes, he's amazing as well. He was going to be my other answer.
So yeah, I'll need to reach out to those 2 guys and get them on. It sounds like it'll be a lot of fun. Flo, where is the best place for people to connect with you?
Probably on Instagram, actually. So my Instagram is @Florence Seabright. They can also email me at info@intakenutritionconsultancy.com. And all my socials are kind of tied to my Flo Seabright Instagram, and my website's all on there, so they can find all of my stuff through Instagram. So that's probably the best place.
Awesome. So we will tag that into the show notes anyway. And I think I've obviously had a look through everything when I was doing my research. I think, like you said, the Flo Seabright Instagram, you'll find everything else through there. So we'll tag that for the guys to go and explore from there if they want to explore what it is you do and find out a bit more about you. For everyone else listening as well, for the best way you can support the podcast and, to enjoy the episodes by guest speakers like Flo and many of the other coaches that we're bringing on to the Coaches Corner, as well as, of course, the weekly Better Body team episodes that will be starting next week. The best thing you can possibly do is to leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. Then that way we can get in front of more people and we can get some more good quality information that hopefully you guys can resonate with. If there's anything that Flo said during the podcast that resonated with you specifically, once you leave your 5-star review, also feel free to drop us a comment in there as well. Other than that, Flo, thanks again for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really fun.
Excellent.